as you can probably guess, I'm thoroughly unprepared for this. So really, it's just a case of let's have a chat. Obviously, I'm very impressed by the 77. In your one of your messages, you said, "What's my favourite strip?" And I'm quite happy. There's two or three that I really liked. I liked the one about the floaty hand. That was
written by Keck.
Yeah. I really enjoyed that. But it's bizarrely the one that I keep coming back to is the one drawn by this young lad that you've got on board. He's like 11 years old.
His 4th birthday last week, Steve. Drew Marr, who lives in Dundee.
It's amazing. I looked at it and I thought, no, because I prefer as I grew up in the 1960s, I was drawn to a more realistic style of drawing. So I was growing up with Jesus Blasco and Eric Bradbury and artists like that. So and that's the style of artwork that I've always preferred. So Don Lawrence, say, on the Trigon Empire, and even Ron Embleton, artists like that. But anything slightly off the wall, I kept coming back to it and thinking, I kind of dismissed it as I went over the page, or scrolled through the page, I should say. But then I kept coming back to it and thinking, oh, this is really good, and it's got a good coherent storyline. It's interesting. It's current. And it is. It's one of my favourites. I mean, there are others. I like Mal Earle's artwork, things like that. So, but it would be interesting to find out from you how you put the whole thing together. From the start.
Okay, but if I could just, with Drew, I've got an idea. Basically, he won't be featuring in the next couple of issues, and as we're a quarterly publication. My thoughts are that I'm going to return to him on an annual basis if the comic keeps, is successful and keeps going. And we'll see over a period of time his development as well. I mean, he's not new to publishing, Steve. He's published about 7 or 8 comics and owns his own publication house.
Oh, Golden Lion? Gold Lion.
Yeah, Gold Lion. And I first saw his stuff in the Comic Scene 2019 annual.
Yeah.
And then read up on him, saw he had a website, and then got in touch with a couple of other people. I mean, he's got his fans. Ian Kennedy really rates him. I can't remember the guy's name, the editor of Beano. But my feeling was, if he's good enough for them, you know what I mean? He's certainly good enough for us. And gave him a chance, and I think he delivered. I mean, what we didn't do in the comic, and I think that was slightly remiss, but we just didn't really have space, Steve, was to run a full kind of, bibliography on these people. But we have in our social media, in all of our groups, websites, all of our areas, kind of done creator interviews and background stuff. But anyone coming straight to the comic might well be kind of intrigued as what is this very different style. But anyone who's been told and has since found out has been very impressed. And I'm really pleased because, it's where we're at. We want to bring people some of their heroes from their childhood. We've got some veterans involved. We want to bring contemporary, professionals, and we're looking to break people and show potentially stars of the future. So that's our remit. And the 77, if you were to ask me to sum it up in a sentence, it's a love letter to the comics that made us. So we have a wide span of years looking back, and my titles start with things like Whizzer and Chips, Monster Fun, Crazy, before I got into Action, 2000 AD. And then after 2000 AD, round about 600, Prog 600, so round about, would that be 1988, 89, I then was very much buying, Sandman, Hellblazer, a lot of Fantagraphic work, and obviously moving on to sort of Bill Sienkiewicz and lots and lots and lots of other sort of American style stuff. But it's people are going to spot, and I hope they do see the genres that we're looking to include. So there's going to be romance strips, there's going to be detective stories, there's going to be obviously space sci-fi, fantasy stuff. So in an anthology, I know that people won't necessarily walk away having gone, I loved everything, but we always hope that, you know, there's going to be a good handful of stories that people will be intrigued with and want to pick up another copy. So, you know, I think it hit its target. And obviously, while we're speaking now, we've had our kind of official launch on the 16th of May. We were doing online web chats on Zoom and stuff, because we were going to actually have an official release launch at Lawless Convention in Bristol last weekend, but obviously that's been cancelled. But you know, we've done what we can in what we've got, and you know, we're now looking to sort of consolidate sales, get rid of our stock, you know, and now we're planning for the next Kickstarter, Steve.
How did the Kickstarter come about? I mean, obviously you kickstarted the first one, and that was very successful. So I'm intrigued to know how that was set up, how quickly you achieved your target, what sort of people that were attracted to come to the Kickstarter and finance the first issue.
Okay, so people know us from our. It was called 1977 to 2000 AD, the 77 coming from that date, the title of the comic, and we've since rebranded the Facebook group, so now it's known as the 77 to 2000 AD. So it shows its link and allegiance there, I guess, you know, as fanboys. But that's our fanzine. If you like, the Facebook group is a fanzine. That's the way I viewed it. And we always wanted to kind of run with our own IP, you know, intellectual property and ideas. And you know, we've been reviewing and writing stuff and looking at people's work and getting involved for a couple of years. And we've held competitions and events online. So like Inktober, Droptober have been included. We've had competitions and such like. And we held an event called the Squirrels last year, which was kind of well received, an awards ceremony run by Dave Healy from the group. So when we had an understanding that we were going to create this comic, from suggestions from lots of people involved on our Facebook groups and other places, you know, we really had to go with a Kickstarter because funds aren't available elsewhere. You can't go to a bank, Steve, and get a loan. I don't know if anyone in the 20th century ever got a loan for a comic, let alone the 21st century with all the financial issues that we've had over the last 10 years or so. So the Kickstarter was the way. So we researched it really thoroughly, and using our media platforms like Twitter, which is run by Dave Bedford from the group. He's one of the directors. So basically he runs Twitter, and we were obviously feeding that with the kind of news that the Kickstarter was coming. And then we have a page on Facebook, and we have a website as well on WordPress. So we were feeding all those channels and building up. Hopefully we got, I think it was 400 people were looking to find out more about the Kickstarter. So when we launched, they knew exactly what was starting. And we converted 200 of those people into backers. And then we gained another 200 odd. So we ended up with over 400 backers, which is an awful lot, to be honest with you, for an unknown title. I mean, you know, a very successful Kickstarter at the tail end of last year was Rock the God, you know, Wagner Grant and Cornwell's new offering, which is coming out later this year. And we're big fans. And incidentally, we had a feature advert in the first edition, which Dan Cornwell drew up specially. But they had, I mean, their target was huge. John's, you know, a good employer, and he wanted to make sure that Dan was paid up front. And he's busy now working through that artwork. I think they raised 24,000, but didn't end up with quite as many backers as we had. Now, we're not in the same league in terms of being able to get the kind of money that they got, but we raised over 7,000, and that was gained within, the target was 3,777 for the want of having some sevens in it. We raised that in 96 hours.
That is astonishing.
Yeah, so we went on and got over 7. We can't say how things are going to go this way round, but you know, sales continue to be strong. We've got Get My Comics, Adrian Clark and his brother's distribution firm are helping us with that. And obviously, because we have, you know, a situation at the moment that all comic shops potentially aren't open, and other distributors which Get My Comics work through, we're having to sell through our own platforms, you know, and theirs. But the aim is to, with Kickstarter 2, to print enough that then will be taken up and go through the usual channels. So I'm hoping that if you look at, for example, the places that Comic Scene is bought in, we'll be there alongside it.
Are you hoping, therefore, to go into WH Smith's as Comic Scene has done?
Yep. Yeah, and we're looking to. I've sent quite a large batch over to a group in New Zealand. Okay, they're going to be distributing it. We'd like to go to all the old territories as such, kind of places that would be interested in having an anthology comic. So we've got someone looking out for us in France and Spain. We might even have a translated copy go out digitally. And obviously, if we could get some interest in the States, I'm not saying we'll be selling in thousands over there, but get some editions out. So having an e-copy, a digital copy, has been really useful. So talking about Europe, Jean-Pierre Duenet, the founding publisher and editor of Météo Hulin, he contacted me, and we've sent him a copy, and he's doing his best to chat to some people. And we've got some kind of reasonably very well-known people, in fact, in the States, just saying nice things and reviewing it and passing it on. And that's all we can hope for, because you cannot buy it in shops, not because we wouldn't have got the distribution, but because those shops aren't open. So we didn't want to delay the launch. We're working on issues 2, 3, and 4 now. And we felt if we backed up the launch, the Kickstarter, people would understand, but we felt that they backed us and parted with their money. And as long as we could get the comic printed, so I think I'm not totally certain who we ended up with printing, but we were able to ensure that was done safely for those employees. And we've used non-contact distribution. So I'm using a parcel service where they come and collect all of the distributed copies that I'm handling in a box. You leave it with them at the front door. And I had 2 boxes taken today. Unfortunately, it meant there's been a tiny delay on some of the comics going out. And we're trying to sort all of that at the moment. But I would say out of the 400 backers, 370 have received their stuff, or should I say 370 of them, their items are in shipping now. So our aim always was to say that everybody should have their stuff by June. And here we are, we're 11, 10, 12 days away. And I think I'm going to hit that. We're just trying to sort out with a good friend of Ian Gibson's, a neighbour, who's going to go around and see Ian and collect his signed posters that he's done for us for Lifeboat. And that, I think, is the only thing. Nick Percival, great guy, did us a variant cover, really popular. He signed loads of posters, and I'm dealing with them today. So, what could have been a logistical issue has just meant a lot of hard work on my behalf, but I'll put the time in, and I think I've learnt a lot. I think for the Kickstarter too, though, I think we're going to go much more with the distribution through Get My Comics. I think they'll be handling more of those items, but I'm sure you'd appreciate, and anyone who's, either set up a Kickstarter or followed one, you generally want to offer extra value items with them as well to kind of get better funding. So we've included prints. So we've got an A4 print from Leo Manco, who's doing Slain for 2000 AD and is obviously working on Space War with Pat Mills. And we've had the cover by Aid Hughes, who's working in V inside the comic. And again, he's working with Pat Mills on Space War. And we've got other items like, for example, Steve McManus and Keck and a couple of other script writers signed scripts for us. So we could then we could pass them on. But those are all flat items. So we offered T-shirts. And of course, the problem is with T-shirts is they're not easy to distribute with a comic. Yeah. So I've taken on those on board myself. But if you're going to do these things, you've got to appreciate it's a lot of hard work. And I've probably spent the last month now, I think 6 to 8 hours a day dealing with this, apart from the couple of days a week whereas I work. I'm a school teacher, and I work part time, and school teachers are still working, so I've had to fit what I'm doing around that. But yeah, it's been a lot of hard work, but it's something I get up in the morning, and I think I've found what I want to do. If I've finally grown up maybe, and then I'm doing what I wanted to do, Steve. Yeah, I've been reflecting while I'm doing it, and I wonder why I didn't do it 20 years ago. But I'll be truthful. I think that only with the opportunity that, for example, the internet's given me to make contacts with lots and lots of people, and to have open conversations with them and get them involved and start sort of becoming kind of like regular friends and members of groups and things. That's our network. That's who we're looking to sell to, Steve. And you're in our demographic as well. The group itself has a demographic of 80% between 40 and 60. And I'll be honest, that's who we're selling to.
Yeah.
You know, there aren't any profanities or curse words or any kind of explicit sexual kind of issues within the comic. And that's not necessarily me saying I'm being prudish or I don't think our readers can cope with it, because I would like a child to pick it up. I would like anyone who's bought it, who's got kids themselves, or would like to offer it to anyone younger to read, they can pick it up and read it. Do you know what I mean? So, but we're not saying it's going to have a plastic bag wrap and have toys in it and be available on that shelf in W.H. Smith's where the kids' comics are these days, you know? So I was saying anyone who's buying Comic Scene, anyone who's interested in, you know, most of the titles. Let me see now. What's the Ian Senior and Jeff Furman title? I've just escaped me for the moment.
Oh, yeah, I know what it is.
Death something or other. I apologise, guys. I do apologise. I don't remember. But that sort of publication, you know, of a certain value, of a certain standard, of a certain kind of type, that's where we're heading for our market. But of course, in an anthology, we can offer, as I said, a lot of different genres. So we're not going to change that. But what we are going to do, Steve, is we're probably going to go to moving shiftly gradually towards 6 pages for most of the titles. So we'll reduce the stories by 1 or 2 or 3, probably around about issue 3. And, you know, we'll settle with our regulars, our continuing strips. But we're still working with submissions for new talent. And we're generally going with that old kind of, you know, stalwart of 2000 AD, the Future Shock, which gives a new up-and-coming writer, team, artist, you know, work together, can actually produce a 4-pager and knowing it will get published. So we're going to keep that going hand in hand with our continuing strips as well.
Running 15 strips was quite ambitious, and an unfortunate side effect of that was maybe 1 or 2 of them weren't given the space to develop the characters enough in that initial episode that they were seeing.
It's going to be a balance that we're going to have to strike. I mean, the issue around whether we can go to more frequent publication obviously is tied into the success of these initial couple of issues, right? And obviously that's testing the market. I mean, if you asked me if I felt with the team that we are and how many hours we can put in as a production team, let alone obviously the artists and the writers, I would say we could probably go to bi-monthly. I don't know when that would be. So I'm taking a leaf from something that a few people have said, but most prominently stuck in my mind is a comment that John Freeman said on one of his articles, was that you need to have that opening panel in the return strip, which is a recap. Yeah. So we will probably have to do recaps. But what we are going to do is, for example, we're going to offer an opportunity for people to, if they stick with us, you know, let's hope so, maybe by issue 4, we'll offer a nice slip case for them, a discount, and they can put their comics together in a slip case. And then, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite an infrequent comic buyer now, Steve. I'm obviously editing this and reading a lot of stuff, and this is taking my time. But for example, today I bought Sandman Omnibus Edition 3. Yeah, 1,100 pages, right? So I had all the Sandman when I was a kid. Yeah, when I was 20 odd years old, I bought the Sandman. Now I had to sell everything and I don't have the space anymore. Okay, but I will buy and go back and buy collected volumes. Now that's sort of counter to maybe what I'm suggesting the 77 will become. But what I'm saying is I don't think we can necessarily, we don't want to go down. I mean, I don't think we can go to a monthly. Therefore, if we're a bi-monthly or a quarterly, I think we have to offer some value. And in distribution terms, comics at £3, £4 don't get sold anymore. The market is dying, I'm afraid, you know, and this is what's happening with Diamond and the Marvel, you know, world, is that they're going to trade paperback, and that's a guarantee because you only have to sell hundreds of those to guarantee your distribution.
Yes.
And I'm knowledgeable enough to know that if we could go to that point, then we've got a chance. But if we're producing a comic where you have to sell the 2,000 to 3,000, that's at the moment, it's like no man's land. You're not going to make it. Now, I'm not saying that we're aiming just to sell 800 copies of comic of 77. I mean, we've gone to a print run of approaching 3,000, but not all of those are going to be available to sale. So if you don't mind, if I could explain, we're embarking on using, and I asked several of the creators about what kind of terms and conditions they'd be happy to work with. All right. So I spoke to the pros. Okay. And basically, they would like a dividend share of any money which is made as a profit, which might only be a share of, let's say, I don't know, this is a figure in the sky, right? But say if the comic at the end of its term sold out and the items that went with it sold out and made £2,000, everyone would get a certain share of that. And that would be to do with how much their story featured in the issue. So it's almost like a page rate.
Yes.
But what we did prior to that is everybody got a share of comics. So they can sign them and they can sell them. So I know the onus then is on them, and it's not quite the same as being paid up front. And I hold my hand up here and say it's not the same thing, you know. But again, come back to our finances. We don't have an advance. We haven't got that. But we've had people who have been really, really kind of proactive, and they're selling like crazy. You know, they're practically out of their stock and have done fine. And that's what we're going with. But the French model, which we're looking at doing, means on reprints and obviously later down the line, the initial writer and artist maintain a certain percentage, if not all, of the IP. Okay, so we only handle original IP, and our idea might be later to reprint. So on that basis, for example, do you recall the Tinkling Triangles story?
Yes. Oh, yes, Steve McManus.
That comes from a story written by Steve McManus, and he's agreed to basically go with 5 strips with us over the first year. Now, those scripts appear in the Sheer Glam Conspiracies.
Yes.
Yeah, his novel about, he has to novelize it, otherwise he'd be taken to court. But basically, as those who are in the know appreciate, you know, he started off as a sub in a particular comic and was charged with creating another one. This was prior to Action, okay? And while the story does go into kind of, fictitious grounds, the end of the book, which I loved, and he sent me a copy for me to read, and it was very much appreciated, has the 5 scripts from this supposed comic in it, and the comic's called Blaze. Yeah, we're publishing that strip by strip. We're going to publish that, and then as a collection, we're going to produce that comic next year, and we're going to set it very much as a 1973 comic. So we're going to have some kind of faux adverts and features, all very much of the era. So it's going to encapsulate almost what the 77 is kind of about, but more in a tongue-in-cheek way. Yeah. So while we are contemporary in what we're setting up and doing, and some of the strips are obviously of today, we are harking back to the style and the methodology of comics in that they are shorter strips. They're not through comics. You know, they're not 24 pages of the same stuff. I know that's a very British thing, but I think in marketing terms, as an editor and as a publisher, I think it's a really good way of showcasing new people. And if the model works for the creators and they find, for example, you know, we got 2 or 3, fairly new to the market artists, I think they'll be picked up and they're free to go off and obviously do that. And if they have more time and want to continue, that's fantastic. But because the French model's being used, we can continue to use their IP, but they get a fair share. You know, because obviously I'm not just saying we want to stick at this level. I am ambitious for the product, I think it will become something that I think will hopefully be, you know, more widely read, therefore sell more copies, therefore generate more income, therefore sustain itself. And our model, we can only plan really for the Kickstarter up to say probably issue 3 or 4 to get us through the first year. But I mean, when I go on Kickstarter, I see that, you know, for example, today, Duncan Jones is gone Kickstarter today with his brand new comic, with Glenn Fabry and Alex de Campi and Simon Bisley contributing to, Now their target's $41,000. Yeah. John Wagner did it last year. Roy Sharpton with the Postal Service story, I can't remember, but he went for $35,000 last year. Now I'm not saying that that's what we'll do, just increase what we're trying to get, but who knows, maybe one of the reduction runs, we might make enough money that we can pay up front to the printers, and the distributors will help us to pay for that standalone on its own 2 feet kind of comic. Yeah. But I don't see that happening until issue 4 or 5, if we're still around. Okay. So that takes us to this time next year, by which time, as I say, we'll have Blaze. That'll be the first one. And then I'm going to choose a couple of the other strips, which we then can bring out the specials as well, in between editions of the 77. So there's a new strip starting next issue called Martian Law, because on Mars he is the law, okay? And it's a very funny, humorous tale, more to do with Midwest America than any one with a big jaw that we can think of, okay? And Brendan Wright, who's an artist who lives in New Zealand, is working with me on that. And again, I'm hoping in the 5 editions he can produce will be 25 pages or 30 pages, and I can singly release that as well as a collected item. Because if you continue along the progression that we imagine, hopefully we should continue to pick up new fans, and they may not have the wherewithal to buy all the back issues, although PDFs will always be available. And I reckon as we go along, I think we'll reduce the price of the PDFs to make them a bundle package each time. So maybe by the time we get to issue 4, maybe the PDFs to buy all 4 will be a tenner. Do you know what I mean? I think it's there because you want people to pick you up and continue on the journey.